Hey everyone, it's Dave. Thank you for tuning in as always, and special thank you to my channel members for supporting what I do here. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Boeing. I know it's a company I don't cover very much in a lot of detail. That's because it's not a pure space company. They do have a large aircraft division as well as some other endeavors, but the news coming from this company and their Starliner aircraft over the past few weeks has gotten so wild to the point where I feel like I just need to talk about it a little bit. It is publicly traded, so we can also take a look at their stock. In some ways, this could be considered the biggest publicly traded space company in the world. Or at least at one point, I guess it would have been. The hits really just have kept on coming for this company, hence the thumbnail image of their outgoing CEO, all bruised and battered. It's just been one thing after another. Ever since this current Starliner mission began, I have been very confident that the astronauts will be returning home in the Starliner. A lot of that is due to the communication being shared by NASA and Boeing, and just the previous tests it's already had, and, you know, the rigorous work that's been done on it over many years. Even after some of these issues with the helium leaks and other things popped up, communications from NASA very much indicated that it would be safe for the astronauts to return home. That all seems like it's changing over the past couple days, and now I actually think it seems more likely than not that the Starliner is not going to return any astronauts home. They're going to have to hitch a ride on a SpaceX Crew Dragon, something that will be incredibly embarrassing for Boeing and another massive black eye for the company. And this is a company that's had nothing but bruises and black eyes for the past couple of years. So yeah, I don't know how much more of this the company can take, whether they're even going to want to continue with their spacecraft division for much longer, and the cash burn that's going along with it, if they can still even compete in the future. Let's talk about all that right now. So, brief history lesson. I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of some of this, but for anyone who isn't, Boeing's Starliner program has been plagued by significant delays and cost overruns since the beginning. The spacecraft has been intended to transport astronauts to the International Space Station and was originally projected to be ready by the end of 2017. However, it's faced numerous setbacks due to technical issues. These delays have pushed the program back by several years, with a first crewed mission only now taking place in June of 2024, several years after the competing Dragon capsule successfully took astronauts to the ISS. As a result of all these issues, Boeing has incurred financial losses totaling over $1.6 billion, making the Starliner program significantly more expensive than SpaceX's Dragon. It's also now unclear how Boeing will ever recoup those losses on the Starliner capsule, given all these delays and the future of the ISS looking to end around 2030. So starting off with the stock chart of Boeing, yeah, obviously it's not been pretty. Now, not all of this has been due to their space division, which is one of the reasons I don't cover the company as closely as some others, because their airplane division is really more of a needle mover for the company, and their issues with their 737 MAX, if you remember all those crashes, door popping out, wheel falling off, all that kind of stuff. Videos coming from employees inside the company showing that they said they wouldn't be willing to fly on their own planes. None of it very good. Anyway, stock absolutely crashed down to $169 per share right now. Was above $400 per share not that long ago. So really been rough. One of my relatives actually has owned this stock at different points, and I did have to tell her I would not want to own this company. I just don't have any confidence in the execution, especially when it comes to the space division with the history of the Starliner and the SLS. This one is definitely not in my portfolio, I can tell you that much. So Eric Berger, who I consider to be one of the most reliable, greatest space reporters working today for Ars Technica, has been tweeting out a little bit about the Starliner and the communications we've been getting around it from NASA and Boeing. He said, "For weeks and weeks, I was 100% confident astronauts were coming back on Starliner. About 10 days ago, I was 80 to 20% certain they were. So 80% that they would come back, 20% that they won't come back on the Starliner. Now I'm less than that. NASA needs to be more transparent. Tweeting out a few hours after that a final decision has not been made, but I now believe it is more likely than not. So going from 100% to 80-20 now to less than 50-50, that Starliner's crew returns on Starliner, and more likely they're going to be returning on Dragon. He asked NASA about this, and their reply was not a denial, but rather that they were evaluating all options. Interestingly, one of the best space podcasts out there for keeping up to date on this kind of stuff and hearing some long-form discussions on it, it's called Main Engine Cutoff. I was listening to it today. The guest was Mark J. Albrecht. He quite a pedigree. He was the executive secretary of the National Space Council from 1989 to 1992 and was principal advisor to President George H.W. Bush on space. He was also a senior executive at SAIC from 92 to 97 and was president of Lockheed Martin's International Launch Services from 1999 to 2006, as well as having written a book. So he has a lot of connections with NASA, having worked there and worked in the government. And he had some interesting things to say about his opinion on what's going to happen with this capsule. Let's take a listen.
Oh yeah, and you look at right now the Dreamliner. I mean, those guys are stuck up there. I mean, I don't have any insight knowledge to that, and my heart's out to all people involved. But that is not a good look. August 28th as a potential deorbit. They're not going to come down in that. I guarantee you. You know the way the system works. They can't test it. You can't fire those things while it's attached. I guarantee you, these guys are going to either Elon's going to have to send another Dragon up to get them all down. They're going to take the Dream. I think it's Dreamliner, and
Starliner,
they're going to
yeah. So.
And they'll detach from the space station and deorbit it. But I forecast it won't have people in it.
Wow.
And by the way, this is a political year. Do you want the head of the National Space Council running for president and to talk about an October surprise? 2 fried astronauts. You know, somebody's going to run it by her and say, well, what is the risk? They go, we think we're ready to bring them back down. Okay. What's the risk? Well, is it 0? Well, no, it's not 0. Is it 5%? Well, is it 10%? Well, it's less than 20%. 1 out of 5 chance. It's less than 1 out of 5. And she's sitting there going, no, thanks.
Yeah, give me the one with 0.
Yeah, give me the one with 0 or very close to 0. I mean, you know, everyone has a non-zero, but
for sure.
I want to ground close to,
or
they get to stay there until November 7th. One or the other. Either they ain't leaving until November 7th or they ain't going on that vehicle.
So yeah, very interesting perspective, taking the politics into account as well on that podcast. And I do recommend checking out the full thing on Spotify or wherever else you listen. It's MECO, again, MECO. So a few other things from Boeing. Obviously, they have now named a new CEO after all the disasters that have gone on for the past couple years. Personally, I think the old CEO should have been out quite a long time ago, and this is way too late. But the new CEO apparently has some good experience and will have a tough job ahead of him, named Robert Kelly, former CEO of Rockwell Collins, and apparently he is well regarded in the aerospace industry. So all the best to him. He has a tough job ahead of him to turn things around. The other weird things that have happened with Boeing, and I don't usually like to dive into conspiracy theory realms, but you got to admit this is really strange. We had a Boeing whistleblower who was blowing the whistle on, malpractices regarding their airplane division, die mysteriously by suicide during a lawsuit going on with Boeing under, sketchy circumstances, to say the least. Police did rule that it was a suicide. Some family members said there's no way he would commit suicide, so take that for what it's worth. Another one here. Second Boeing whistleblower dies after a short illness. This was a former quality auditor at Boeing who alleged gross misconduct by quality management. So I want to be clear that I'm not accusing Boeing of having these people killed, but it is something that is just really odd to have happen twice. I mean, most companies don't even have that many whistleblowers coming forward. So yeah, it's definitely been a rough few years with Boeing. Also, Boeing prime contractor on NASA's SLS rocket, supposed to be taking us back to the moon and beyond eventually. Way over budget now, with the NASA Inspector General highly critical of the SLS spending. NASA Inspector General report revealed that there's been $28.3 billion of SLS expenses since 2012, which results in a $4.2 billion per launch cost if you amortize the launches. Now, this rocket was set back by 6 years of delays and $6 billion of cost overruns on those RS-25 engines, as well as the booster and all the rest. Now, interestingly, this contract was a cost-plus contract, which is kind of the old school way of doing things. And what this means is that just Boeing gets paid whatever it costs them to build the rocket plus a certain amount extra. So let's say they build it on time, on price for $1 billion. They get paid $1.2 billion. That's $1 billion to cover all their costs, and then $200 million for them for their efforts. Now, let's say instead it ends up costing theoretically $6 billion where it was supposed to cost $1 billion. They get paid that $6 billion to cover all their costs, and then that extra $200 million again for their efforts. So really not a lot of skin in the game. They'll make their money no matter what, no matter how much cost overruns there are. There are some defenders of these contracts, and I won't say they're not without merit sometimes, but the way things are going is moving away from these cost-plus contracts, which tend to saddle the government with a lot of extra cost overruns. Now, the Starliner contract is not a cost plus. It is actually fixed price, which is what SpaceX often does when they work with the government. They could do a fixed price, and if there's trouble, if there's extra work involved, the company that signed the deal, aka SpaceX or Boeing, just has to eat those costs themselves. In the case of SpaceX, it's been more than manageable, and they've been very profitable with their Dragon business. The Starliner, of course, has not been profitable at all. In a recently quarterly earnings, Boeing revealed that the space and defense segment lost a $913 million. That is wild. Boeing blamed the shortfall on higher than expected development costs for Air Force training jet, as well as Air Force One, and yes, the beleaguered Starliner spacecraft program. Interestingly enough, Boeing, who owns half of ULA with Lockheed Martin, is not in the running to buy out the company, which is thought to be for sale, meaning Boeing will very soon have no access to commercial and government national security launches, only SLS, which is only really used for NASA. So their access to space is going to be a lot less. Starliner losing them a ton of money. SLS way late. Makes you wonder how dedicated they will even be to the space industry in the future, especially because Boeing has now admitted, basically saying they can't make money with fixed price contracts. The CEO was quoted as saying, "As you know, part of the challenge we're dealing with are legacy contracts that we need to get out from under. Rest assured, we haven't signed any fixed price development contracts nor intend to. And this is fundamental to accelerating the company's recovery." I find this very interesting because NASA is really loving these fixed price contracts right now and is working very well for them with SpaceX's launches as well as the Dragon. And obviously, NASA's probably pretty happy that they're not eating these billions of dollars in additional costs for the Starliner that Boeing has had to incur. In this day and age, and it really, to me, it should just be a normal business practice. If Boeing says they're going to deliver a product for a certain price at a certain time and they can't do it and it costs way more, why should NASA have to foot the bill on Boeing not living up to what they said they could do? And then you've got companies like Rocket Lab signing fixed price contracts for the SDA satellites. I'm sure they're going to deliver them on time and on budget. SpaceX delivering launches and Dragon capsules on time and on budget. If Boeing just thinks NASA is going to keep giving them these cost-plus contracts in the future, I feel like they'll be in for a rude awakening. And yeah, I don't know how long their space part of the company is really going to remain that competitive and viable in the future. So that's today's update on the Boeing train wreck that's been going on for the past few years. I think the change in management can't come soon enough. looks more and more likely like Starliner is not going to be returning those 2 astronauts back to Earth. I mean, you heard it on that interview. Even if there's a 1% chance of an error and the astronauts die, is Kamala Harris really going to want to risk that, knowing she's going into an election campaign and it will definitely be pinned on her if there is a problem? I don't think so either. Really rough times right now for Boeing. I just don't know about the future of their entire space division. Let me know how you think this is all going to pan out in the future. Will they be able to turn things around? Is this company a good investment since it's dropped so much over the past 5 years and they have a new incoming CEO? Interested to hear all your thoughts and comments down below, as well as any conspiracy theories you might have. I guess it's always fun to speculate. Also, if there's any Boeing shareholders watching, interested to hear your take on things. Am I being too harsh? And maybe this isn't all their fault after all. Let me know down below. So please do subscribe if you haven't already. It's very helpful for the channel growth. I hope you guys have a great day and a great weekend, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.